Hi, my name is Autumn Dickson, and this week is June 22nd through the 28th of the Come Follow Me program associated with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And this week we are studying 2 Samuel 11 through 12 and 1 Kings 3, 6 through 9, and 11. So one of the events that occurs this week is that Solomon is ascending to the throne after his father David. And very early on with this happening, he has a dream, and I want to read about this dream. So this is 1 Kings chapter 3, verse 5. It says, In Gibeon the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream by night, and God said, Ask what I shall give thee. So he appeared, he says, Ask for something that I will give thee. Now this is an incredible experience to have, right, as Solomon is stepping up into the throne. And the Lord appears, he says, What do you want? I'll grant you a prayer. And Solomon asks for wisdom. And the Lord is super pleased about this because Solomon could have asked to be really rich. He could have asked for a long life or the defeat of his enemies. But he chose wisdom so that he could better judge his people as a king. As I read the story, I actually found myself really diving in. I asked myself, what would I ask? What would I truly ask for if I had this experience where the Lord's like, what do you want? I'll essentially grant you a wish. What would I ask for? And as I got really into this exercise, trying to narrow it down to one thing that I wanted, I learned a couple of things. And I want to talk about a couple of things that I learned while I was diving into this experience. Principle number one that I realized while going through this experience. So I was thinking about what blessing I would want the most. I actually had a list of things and I was trying to narrow it down to one thing that I wanted. So I could ask for a grateful heart or to see people clearly. I could ask to see his hand in my life. I could ask for spiritual protection for my family. I was trying to think what would be most effective, like what is going to really bring me what matters to me. And as I was trying to narrow it down to one, it dawned on me that I could ask for all of them. I didn't have to wait for the Lord to appear to me in a dream and offer to answer my prayers. I didn't have to pick just one blessing. I could literally get down on my knees and pray for all of them, regardless of whether I had received a dream. And maybe that's a silly principle for other people, but it hit me pretty hard. So what do you ask for? What would you ask for? What do you ask for? And what will you ask for? Thinking of this principle. And you know, it's really funny. It's kind of ironic because I was listing all of these things that mattered so much to me that I really wanted in my life. And I realized that I had not prayed for most of them in a really long time. I often pray for spiritual protection for my family, but I can't remember the last time I prayed for a grateful heart or seeing people clearly or seeing the Lord's hand in my life. I do pray for those things off and on, but it's been a minute. My prayers are not, I would not define them as bad by any means. But it was really interesting. It was an interesting experience seeing my values and realizing that they had been buried in the day-to-day of mortal life, which actually brings me to my second point. My second principle that I learned is that it is extremely powerful to have your heart reflected back to you. It was a very powerful experience to realize that I had all these things that mattered to me in my heart, and what was I doing about them? So normally, when we approach prayer and getting answers from the Lord, this is the normal process in which it happens. The prophet or the prophets through the words in the scriptures, they encourage us to seek the Lord through prayer. And then the Lord simply answers through his wisdom. That's how the normal route goes. But in the example of Solomon, it is different. Solomon has the Lord appear to him in a dream. It wasn't a prophet. Lord appeared. And the Lord essentially says, hey, what do you wish for? He says, I am going to grant you a prayer. What do you want? This is highly unusual, at least in my experience. Maybe you've had a different experience, but this is highly unusual the way that the Lord approached Solomon as he was ascending to the throne. Why was it different? Because the Lord is extremely intentional. He does things for a reason. Why did he make this choice in regards to Solomon? When we reflect on these two differences, the Lord appeared to him directly, and he is basically granting a wish. When we combine those things, we get a really interesting result. And whether this result was the actual direct intention of the Lord is a question only the Lord can answer. But I do know that it was at least a side effect of the Lord's choice to work with Solomon in this way. And that side effect, or intention, I don't know, but that side effect was that Solomon's heart was reflected back to him. So I want to go through both of those differences, that the Lord appeared directly and that he was basically granting Solomon a wish. I want to talk about those two things and why it reflects Solomon's heart back to him and why it's important. So difference number one, the Lord appeared to him. This is very different than how the Lord normally works. He doesn't usually appear. The Lord will usually do the bare minimum for what's sufficient. And I'm not saying that because he's lazy or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying. Stick with me. What I'm trying to say is the Lord doesn't, if you go to the Lord and you're like, hey, should I do this? And the Lord's answer is yes, the Lord doesn't always say yes. Sometimes he simply refrains from saying no. And that's what I mean when I say he does the least amount that is sufficient. If he knows you're going to move forward anyway, he just simply refrains from telling you no, rather than necessarily giving you the green light. Sometimes he's really merciful. He gives you the green light. But he doesn't always give you the green light. Sometimes he just doesn't give you a red light. He does not always interfere directly. He is extremely involved in our lives, but he preserves faith. He is behind the scenes manipulating details in our favor and trying to make things come together for us. But as for actually appearing to us, it's not something he normally does. And there's reasons for that. There's reasons that he protects faith. The first reason that comes to mind in this particular scenario is the fact that Solomon started worshiping other gods because of his foreign wives, or because of his own choices, and he was influenced by his foreign wives. He started worshiping other gods, and I wonder how much deeper that betrayal was because the Lord had appeared to him in a dream. The Lord is extremely involved in our lives, but when it comes to direct interference, I feel like he keeps it to a minimum in order to protect us. So despite the fact that he could have let Solomon pray just normally, he chose to come to Solomon. He chose to have that direct experience. Why? I believe that part of that reason, especially as Solomon is ascending to the throne, I believe, obviously I don't know, but I believe that part of that reason is because it reflected Solomon's heart back to himself at a critical time. And maybe normal prayer should do that for us more often, but it doesn't always do that. Because the Lord appeared to Solomon, he was going to be extremely intentional in what he was asking for. In comparison to prayers of faith, as much as prayers of faith probably should inspire that in us, Solomon was going to be extremely intentional because the Lord appeared to him. I mean, I would be way more intentional if the Lord came to me and was talking to me about it. It forces intention. It forces us to see what really matters to us. It reflects our heart back to us. Now, the second difference. He basically offered Solomon a wish because the Lord offers to answer our prayers according to his wisdom and what's best for us. But he basically came to Solomon and offered to grant a wish. When I approach prayer normally, I kind of talk openly. I pray for little things. I don't always have the best focus. I ask for a lot of things. When I thought about what I would request of the Lord, if I had one thing and he came to me, he's like, I'm basically going to grant you a wish. When I thought about what I would request, it suddenly made me really think about what mattered to me. It made me extremely intentional. And this wasn't even my experience. It wasn't even my dream, but I was suddenly very concerned about what I would be asking for if I was in that situation. It reflected my heart back to me. It helped me see what really matters to me. What do I value? What do I really want from the Lord? Now, this is all really interesting when you think about it in the context of the fact that the Lord already knows our hearts. When he came to Solomon and he's like, what do you want? He knew Solomon's heart. Mankind looketh on the outside, the Lord looketh on the heart. This experience when the Lord was pushing Solomon into this very deep intention and reflecting his heart back to him, the Lord wasn't trying to figure Solomon's heart out. Rather, I want you to think about Solomon having this powerful experience where he's looking at his own heart right as he is ascending into this role where he is going to have tons of power and responsibility. It was going to make him pray with intent, but it was also going to make him live with intent. I want you to think about how Solomon might have felt when he was approaching that throne, when he was thinking about how he was going to govern, and when people would come into him asking for help, how was he going to approach that situation? And how did his experience with the Lord, when he asked for wisdom, how was that experience going to change his approach to these people? How much more intentional was he going to live because he had had this experience? I am not ascending to a throne. I have not had a dream of the Lord. I have not been offered a wish. But even my less intense experience of putting myself into the shoes of Solomon changed how I pray. It changed how I pray. It made me pray very intentionally, very specifically. And because of that, it also changed how I live. It approached how I change how I live. Because when you pray for certain spiritual gifts, you are going to approach life differently when life is calling upon those spiritual gifts. I testify that the Lord is very intentional in his decisions. When he chooses to act in a specific way in the scriptures, when we can read a story about how the Lord is working in your life or the lives of other people, the lives of the ancient people in the Bible, the Lord is intentional. He knows our hearts. We can learn so much about his character by studying the decisions he makes in regards to his children. I testify that he is involved in your life, so involved in your life, and he acts very intentionally. I testify that if we can learn to act with purpose like he does, I think of Solomon acting with more intent and more purpose because of this dream that he had. If we can learn to mimic that, to act with intention, our lives will change more readily. Our lives will change more readily because our lives will suddenly become more available to him. And I say that in the name of Jesus Christ, amen.